Hi, and welcome to the Locals Guide Community Building Podcast. Today, my guest is Elizabeth Bretko of ÜBER Herbal. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's great to have you. So, what I'd like you to do is just tell us a little bit, first of all, about ÜBER Herbal and what are the products that you offer. And then we'll get a little bit more into like what led you to this point in your life with this business.
Awesome. Okay. Well, ÜBER Herbal is a pretty diverse offering of products. We specialize in chai, heart song chai. And from chai, we also have a bunch of loose tea blends. We have a line of 11 instant herbal tea blends where you just stir them directly into hot water and you don't need a strainer, tea bag, or anything like that. So they're great for people on the go, the office, camping. Things like that. And then I also make immune boosters. So I make fire ciders and drinking vinegars and a bunch of seasonal products that come out once a year. And they all have like little cult followings, like our nettle sea salt comes out every June. And then when it's gone for the next year. And then I grow marigolds and I string them into ceremonial garlands and I sell them all across the country.
Great. So I'm curious, tell me more about fire ciders. I don't know about fire ciders.
Yeah, so fire cider is kind of like grandma's old recipe for wellness, where she would have just said, oh, you have a tickle in your throat, thrown a bunch of things together, pinched your nose and made you toss it back. It's an apple cider vinegar that steeps traditionally 6 to 8 weeks. And it has all the things, hot peppers and onions and garlic and shallots. And I have lemons and limes in mine and fresh turmeric and ginger. And at this point in my life, I like to take the shot and dance around the kitchen, but it is very intense with all of the combo of all those things. And so I like to make it kind of like a hot toddy. So a little bit hot water, honey, and lemon, and it makes a really lovely nightcap. And it's great for when like you've been in an airport or you just like wake up with a tickle in your throat, something like that. It really helps boost your immune system.
And so is it kind of like a one shot and go thing? Or do you recommend that when someone feels that way, that they kind of have a drink a few times a day for a few days?
Yeah, if I
Get
feel like
over
I'm
that.
going down with something, I'll drink it. Probably I'll make a big quart jar of it and drink it all day long. But it is really helpful just to, even if you just took a shot or two once or twice a day. Yeah.
And tell me about what the different properties are of different ingredients that make it so immune boosting, what you know about them.
Well, I think that the vinegar is very alkalinizing to our bodies. And we tend to, because we're in this like period of human history where we get to choose what we want to eat and drink, we tend to like go for like the things that taste good. And we've sort of eliminated like the acids and the bitters from our diets. And so I think that's one of the reasons that fire cider is so helpful, because it alkalinizes your body and helps you sort of bring you back into center. And then the horseradish, the garlic, the onion, they're all just hot, so they help burn off whatever is in there. And then there's tons of citrus, and it's a traditional recipe that, it's been, I think people have been making it forever. And so there's so many different recipes out there that you can make. And several years ago, fire cider was in the news because someone trademarked the name fire cider. And in order to defend their trademark, they came after like all the little people like me who were making fire cider, and they forced us all legally to change our names and change our labels. And several herbalists took them to court. And so it was this 5-year process where none of us could call it fire cider. And then they won in court. The people won and we got it back. So we changed all our labels back and now it says fire cider again.
Wow. So tell me about the first time you heard of fire cider or drank a fire cider. Was it through someone, like a grandmother giving it to you, or
it was through kind of like this place in Ashland called the Bike House that was just this like rental house that like way too many people lived in, and everyone was obsessed with like bikes and DIY and dumpster diving and things like that. And that was the first time I ever had fire cider, and it was this like crusty, strange jar that they pulled out, and everybody took a little shot. And it has honey in it, so it balances out the vinegar. So it's this funny little thing where like your taste buds can't figure out exactly what they're trying because there's so many flavors at once. And I just was obsessed, immediately obsessed. I was like, what is this? It feels so strange, but my body loves it. And it is one of those things I feel like, even if you're like, ooh, that sounds terrible, like once you have it once, then your body like overdoes your mind, cancels out your brain being like, no, 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 no. And your body's like, oh, please give it to me again. Yes.
And you mentioned several also products that are immune boosters, and you mentioned the nettles, and you said that they're seasonal. How many of the other immune boosters do you offer?
So I do, because some people just have an aversion to the onions and the garlic and the horseradish. I usually do a shrub to go along with the fire cider, and a shrub is like a drinking vinegar. So the one I have right now is pomegranate and elderberry and hibiscus. It's called a red shrub, and I just did all of the bright red foods, and again, steep it in the vinegar for 6 weeks, press it out, and then you just take shots. And that one, and with a lot of shrubs, I like them better with like a little ginger ale, little bubbly water. They make a great mixer. So I like to offer an alternative for the people who just can't do the fire cider. And then the seasonals started because I do farmers markets and I'm in the farming community here. And a lot of people just have a lot of waste. I know a lot of people who are just seed growers. So they grow all these beautiful peppers and then they scoop out the seeds and that's it. And so I would take all the peppers and smoke them and make like a spicy salt. The nettle sea salt is one that I thought, you know, some people just don't drink tea. And there's definitely coffee people who are like, I don't do tea. So I was like, how do I get those people to get nettles? Because we have a high allergy season here, and nettles are really good, especially if you've like been taking them before the allergies start. So I go out once a year and I wild harvest all the nettles, and then I dry them in the dehydrator with the salt. So as it's all drying together, and it just becomes this like green, really high in chlorophyll, really yummy salt that you can kind of add to anything. It's a finishing salt. So it's after you cook, you just throw it on your food.
Oh,
and I got really into the finishing salts because I have a picky eater as a child. And so it's really nice to make the bland food that she can eat. And then I can add my flavors afterwards.
So it's like the nettle is dried up then and crumbly, and it just goes on with the salt. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So that's kind of where the seasonals came from. And when I first launched, so I've been making the chai for 23 years. But I closed my chai business when I got pregnant with my daughter. And there was this 3-year hiatus where I was like, I'm never making tea again. And everyone laughed. And I was like, adamantly never going to do it again. And so that's when I got into the seasonals. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to get the byproducts from the farmers and I'm going to make all these seasonal foods. And that's going to be my business. But everywhere I went, people were like, can I have some chai? Can I have some chai? And I'm like, there's like a million chai makers. Like, you don't need me to do that for you anymore. But that is just not the way people felt. And so I kind of got bullied back into making chai. And the seasonals are just something that, like, you know, at this point when you're, you know, one of the things that you mentioned before we hit record was that we would talk about like where my business is at now. And my business is like at a place where like I have too many products and I do too many things. And I really need to sort of like, I've been saying kind of kill off the babies. Like, I need to streamline. And the seasonals are probably the one because they're always changing and they have these small little cult followings that I should let go of, but they also bring me the most joy. And I just love making them so much. So I am just sort of stubborn in that way of keeping them with me.
Yeah, well, I'm sure your cult followers would not like to hear that news.
And one of them is my daughter, and she is like, "You can't drop this, and you can't drop this."
So give me another example. You mentioned the nettles. What's another example of a seasonal?
Let's see. It's kind of the off season right now. But sometimes I'll do like I just did for personal use some pickled quail eggs. I used to do those more often. But it's really quite tedious to peel the eggs. So now I just do that one for personal use. Because I grow marigolds, I've been doing a lot of marigolds. So I have a marigold tincture now. And then I've also been doing just sugared marigold petals, where the petals are just like pushed in with some lemon zest and sugar. And then you can like use them on morning buns or on bread, or they're just beautiful. And marigolds are actually really, really good for you, especially for people as they're aging. They help promote collagen production, and they're great for the eyes. They're full of lutein, which is really great for eyesight. So I've been working more and more with the marigolds.
And so tell me, I guess it seems like then, are the marigolds and the chai tea, are those sort of like the bigger part of your business?
Yeah,
or along with the fire cider, or how would you like weight how much you do?
And the global pandemic has had a real impact on what my products are and how they sell. So the chai is like the main, it's like the foundation of the business. I've been doing it the longest, and I grind all the chai spices on this bicycle. So the bicycle is very famous, and it's just a really cool way to offer chai, because they're whole spices that are ground by this bicycle. So that it's just very like traditional and full of flavor. And so that's kind of the foundation of the business. And then I have the instant herbals that I talked about, the powdered tea blends. Those are kind of my pride and joy. And there's 11 of them. And I just think they're so awesome. They're so easy. Once you find the herbal formula, you can put them in smoothies, you can cook with them. And like I said earlier, they're just so great for busy people. So those are kind of I sell those to a few stores. I mostly sell those at farmers market and online. And so those are kind of the bulk of the tea side of the business. And then I've been doing the marigolds. This will be my 11th year. And every year I just started it. Like, I wonder if people would want this. They do it all over the world. And so, but no one was doing it in this country. And so I was like, let me just see how this goes. And so every year for 10 years, I plant more, and every year I sell out earlier. And so the marigolds have really taken over the business. I would almost say that it's probably 60-40 at this point, with the marigolds being like the bulk of the income. And that season is from like July to November.
And tell me again what products you make out of the marigolds. So you mentioned a tincture, but also just the flowers themselves, making garlands?
Yeah, so the basics, like the seasonals are kind of like a new thing this year, but the base of the marigold income is based on 4-foot garlands. So I harvest on Friday nights, and then I string them at market, sell them. But most of my income comes from around the world, or around the country. Sorry, I don't really do international shipping with the flowers, but I ship all over the country for weddings and funerals and events. And that has just been the bulk of it. And especially last year, it was the most overwhelming response ever. I mean, I had like sometimes 3 weddings a weekend. And so I'm got to string them all, pack them all, ship them all off, wait for them to arrive, hope they arrive in good condition, hope they arrive at all. It's it's very stressful, that part of it.
And so do you find that your online orders picked up because of the pandemic, because more people are going online, or just that it's just
I think that the events and weddings went on hold.
Uh-huh.
And then the first year after the pandemic, we had like probably double the weddings because everyone had put it off. But also, it changed the way people throw events. And I think that what I saw was that people leaned towards smaller events. So they're
Uh-huh.
inviting less people. So they're spending less money on meals and things like that. And so they were like, some of the brides were buying garlands for each like seat at the table, and then everyone
Oh,
gets to take the garland home, and they dry beautifully. So you have this beautiful pop of color at the wedding, and then people get to take it home, hang it at their own house, and have a keepsake from this beautiful day.
so when they receive it, it's still in its like fresh
Yeah,
picked state, and then over time,
yeah,
depending how soon the wedding is, it just slowly starts to dry.
yeah. They dry and they're beautiful, and it's been such a cool farm product because I don't have waste. Nothing goes to the compost. Everything I string, I dry, and everything that doesn't sell fresh sells dried. And I sell on Etsy, and I sell out every year, even though I make more and more. And this year, I was so overwhelmed because I had like 14 bins of dried garlands, and I was like, "This is like 3 years worth. Like, who could ever buy this many garlands?" And they all sold. So, and
Wow.
I'm out now. Like normally, I would try to like get all the way to the beginning of the next season, but I've been out for a month and a half or so.
And that's through Etsy then? A lot of that is
A
connected
lot
to
of it's through
Etsy?
Etsy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it's funny because I have the Etsy shop was always set up as a tea shop with like this one category of marigolds, but 95% of what I sell on Etsy is marigolds. So
Wow.
people
Wow.
just
And
aren't really
so
going there to shop for tea.
so which came first, the chai or the marigolds?
People ask me like how I got into the marigolds, and I totally blame the chai because they're both like very strong things from India, traditions.
Uh-huh.
And I've never been to India, so I don't really know, but I've just seen a lot of pictures. And all the time I've been researching chai, you see the marigolds in the background, and you see the like markets where all the people are sitting with piles of marigolds. And um, so when I landed on a farm, I was like, I got to do this. So I feel like it's just in me. I don't really know. It's hard to explain.
So when you say you landed on a farm, you mean like the idea came to you and you thought, "Oh, I'm going to do this." Or do you literally mean you saw a farm and thought, "I'm going to do this?"
Yeah, no, I was living on a farm,
Uh-huh.
and with my daughter's dad.
Uh-huh.
And so I had the opportunity to plant anything I wanted, and I was already doing farmers markets. And so I say, I just want to, there's a lot of really strong flower farmers in this area, and I didn't want to like jump into a market where I had direct competition, but I
Uh-huh.
wanted to grow flowers. And so I was like, I'm just going to give it a whirl and see if people want them. And it's turned into, like I said, a huge part of my business. Yeah.
Wow. Also, I think of marigolds associated with Mexican traditions of Day of the Dead. So I was wondering
It's
if you find that on your sales as well.
Oh, yes. I work really, really hard to get to November because we usually have freezes in October. So in the past couple of years, I've gone into the greenhouse and extended the season that way. And really, I always wanted to see like what would happen if I could get through November with the marigolds. And this year I did because we just had a stellar fall.
Uh-huh.
And what I learned is it like crashes right into tea season. And so like October, November are like the busiest months that I have in my business. And it's almost like I wouldn't say it's awesome. It's great to have so much interest and so many sales, but it's almost like they're two businesses that like need everything at the same time. And so it's pretty funny when you have this like goal and then you achieve the goal and you're like, oh, actually, I don't think I want to do that. So
And do you have employees?
no, I mean, I don't really have employees. I have a couple of people who like to help me harvest,
Uh-huh.
And I'm a landless farmer. So I now live just right in town and I rent a space at the farm.
Uh-huh.
And so, they water my seedlings and drive the tractor. And, they're definitely not my employees. I'm their renter, but they help me beyond anything that I could pull off on my own.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And let's go back then. So marigold sprang out of chai and this tradition from India,
Yeah.
um, inspired by that. Tell me how the chai started.
Oh my gosh. So I was, the Rogue Valley is kind of a small place, and I worked for a social services organization working with like teenagers, um, and helping them get through school and get, off the street and get, the services that they needed. And then when I left that organization, there was only one in the whole valley. So it's not like I could just like, get a job somewhere else like you could in a big city. It was like over. So I was on unemployment and wondering what to do, like if I would go back to school or if I would move up to Portland and kind of do the same job in a bigger place. And I had these two guy friends who were starting this chai company. So it was their recipe and their idea. And this was back in 2000, and chai was just sort of coming into the American mainstream. And I came in kind of as the girl. Like I was like, do you have a tablecloth for your table? Do you have a logo for your chai? And so I drew the first logo and I just sort of came in and started helping them out. And within the first year, they were both over it and wanted to do other things. And so they basically gifted me the business and the recipe, and I just kept going. And
Oh,
for the
wow.
first several years, I just used a cafe kitchen at night, and I would brew the chai all night. And then during the day, I would deliver it by bicycle to the cafes in Ashland. And that's how it started. I don't brew anymore because the quality of the ingredients and the time it takes, like I can't compete with the people in a box making chai. Price wise, it's just sort of priced itself out of being a realistic product, but I still make the chai to sell so that people can brew it themselves.
Okay, that's I didn't realize. So you did actually brew it yourself and
Yeah,
deliver the liquid form
yeah, to
to.
cafes and restaurants. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I
It's
think
been a whole
my
big
best
thing.
I was gonna say my best chai experience so far, I have bought chai at coffee house and also just bought it with brewing it myself. But my very best chai experience was a friend of mine, um, Indian American woman who brewed her own and with all the spices that were fresh, and I just loved it. I said, oh, I haven't been really drinking chai. I thought I had been drinking chai, but this is delicious.
Yeah, I mean, chai is a very high Ayurvedic medicine, and it's all about digestion and assimilation of what you've already been eating and then elimination. And so, I mean, I think if you look at Ayurveda, it's like one of the top three medicines. And then we brought it over here and filled it with sugar and put it in these Tetra boxes and, just totally abused it. But ultimately, like the fresh experience, like you're talking about, is really wholesome and healing for your body.
And so, um, I don't know if you have any like recipe secrets that you don't want to reveal, but what are the basic spices and qualities, properties of those spices that you put into your chai?
Yeah. So the cool thing about chai is that it's very much like a reflection of the neighborhood that it's made out of and the ingredients that people can get. So it changes personality a lot as you go region to region or even town to town. But typically it has cardamom and black pepper and black tea for sure. And then aside of that, I use ginger and cinnamon, which I think are pretty traditional. And I use a lot of allspice also.
Mhm.
Um, but again, it really does that, the person making the chai is typically in India would be a man, and he'd be called the chai baba. And it would be like his recipe based off of like what the spice trade brought to his region. And that's one of the things I love about it, is that it is a real, like, there there are no two chais that are the same.
Uh-huh.
And yet they all have that same sort of, you mix in the milk and your whole like heart warms and your belly warms and gets excited.
And so did you travel in India?
I've never been to India.
Oh.
I'm such a poser.
You said it as if you had these experiences, and so I was kind of feeling transported and thinking, oh, you've had.
Yeah, by trade, I'm like a historian and a researcher, and so I really spent like the first couple of years in the chai business, because I wasn't the maker, I was just the helper, really doing the research and going down the rabbit hole of all the traditions of chai, and we just really wanted to represent it well, and we didn't want to like I don't know, colonialize it beyond, we wanted to be an authentic chai. So and it's not something I think I would have just stuck with, but I feel like Heartsong Chai picked me and has a mission in the world. And even when I try to put it down, it's like, no, girl, get back on that bike.
So how did the bike come into the picture? Was it always a part of the chai making?
Early. I think it's been like maybe the first 2 years, but the way it came in was again from the bike house, and that group of people, I was grinding with a hand grinder. And they just kept watching me do it and be like, we could improve this. And so a couple of people built the bike grinder for me. And it's a tool that is still going. I mean, every once in a while it has issues, and I'm going to knock on some wood right now because I'm not the best bike mechanic. But it's such a simple tool that it actually, I'm just amazed by it. I mean, it's like 20 years old, 21.
It's funny because I have in my memory 2 experiences with bike propelled energy. One of them is when I took a group of students from Washington, D.C. on an environmental education program down into the Chesapeake Bay, and we went to this tiny island, and there was a bike that we had to ride to get our electricity on that island for what we needed to do. And then also in Costa Rica, from the time that I lived in Costa Rica, there is a farm, a coffee farm that also has sugarcane, but they have a bike that people can ride to press the sugarcane through. And so that's another thing that they do. It like presses it, and then they give the scraps to the goats. And so like I have 2 memories of a bike. So when you said the bike, I can already conceptualize it.
Yeah.
And think, oh, it's interesting, like how just using that as a way of keeping active too, and relying on our own human energy to get things done.
Yeah, simple technology. It's so cool.
So the chai, the fire ciders, the seasonals, and also the marigolds. Is there any other part of that, of your business?
Well, so yeah, with the tea business, I sell tea bags to local cafes and restaurants. So there's a whole wholesale aspect, which has been really cool. And reminiscent of the early days when I used to sell chai to all the restaurants in Ashland. And then the instant herbals are kind of to me, the most exciting part of the product line. I mean, I love them all. I love the seasonals because they're, like at this point, I've been making things in the kitchen for 20 something years. So when I get to do a new recipe or experiment, I tend to get like really excited. But I would say, for me being in the tea business for so long, the instant herbals have always been something that I wanted to put out into the world. And it's like the product line that I'm most proud of. They're all original recipes, and they're really specific. Like one of them is called the Nasty Cough Killer. And I've been working with a friend of mine who lives in Eugene who has emphysema.
Uh-huh.
And so it's a chronic bronchial aid. So it's not like designed to taste well. In fact, we've tried to make it taste good, and you just can't.
Uh-huh.
It has a lot of horehound and just really strong, bitter flavors. But for people who are constantly getting sick and it goes to their lungs, or people who have emphysema or lung cancer, or like really dire breathing challenges, the nasty is like a godsend. And so I love that product line because I feel like they're really, really specific. Like one's called the Broken Hearted Blend, and it's for those times in life where you just can't eat or sleep. And, um, it's just immune boosting and nourishing. So even if all you can do is sprinkle it on a piece of toast, it's going to like help you come back to the land of the living. They're just really special, beautiful blends that I'm really, really proud of.
And so those are in a powder that can either be added to like hot water to drink as a tea or just sprinkled directly on something that you're going to consume.
Yep, you can put them in smoothies, you can cook with them, but they're designed to be just a lovely cup of tea. And you just use half a teaspoon in a cup of hot water. So a little goes a long way. And the thing I love about them is that you're eating the whole plant. So you're not just doing a water extraction, which is what tea does, but you're
Uh-huh.
actually ingesting everything.
Okay, yeah. So it's not like it dissolves then in the water. It's just your it's powdered enough so that you're like drinking it too.
Yeah, it dissolves and then there's like a gritty last sip. And so you can leave it or you can take it.
And so you mentioned at the very beginning, and you mentioned again just about bitters. Can you just explain to listeners the value of bitters in our diet?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I knew more, but what I do know is that our diets used to be much more based on what we could get and less on what we desire. And so we've tended, especially in our country, to go towards like sweet things and less into like bitters. And so our bodies tend to be very acidic, which is just a harder way to function. If you think of like a well balanced, you would be more alkaline. And then yeah, I don't know. I mean, the short answer is that we're just very spoiled and we eat what we want. And so our bodies are out of whack, and then we like rely on Western medicine when we have issues, but a lot of the issues that we have are actually created by our lifestyle and our diet. And
Right.
so bitters are an incredible digestive aid, and they really help, similar to chai, with assimilation and elimination of the foods that we do eat. So just as a really simple example, a lot of plants are adaptogens, like cinnamon is a great one. So just
Mhm.
adding a little cinnamon to your diet, especially if you can eat it daily, it just helps everything else that you take work better, and it helps your body kind of grab the essentials. It's kind of like a booster pack for anything
Uh-huh.
else that you've been
And
taking.
and for those that may not know the term adaptogen, can you just explain that again?
Yeah, adaptogen is really like it says, it's like it helps whatever else is being used work better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you have any instant herbal mixes that work specifically for digestion?
Well, chai, I have a chocolate chai.
Uh-huh.
So chai is the one I always try if anyone has digestive issues, I try to push them there. And some people have had really poor experiences with chai, and they just don't like it, or they don't like the spice combo or whatever. And so Tulsi is a great digestive aid. It's a basil plant. They call it holy basil, again from India. And in India they call it the elixir of life, and it's an excellent, excellent digestive. We keep it around in tincture form all the time, because if you have like the sour belly from anything, just taking a little bit of the tincture will just set you right. It's an incredible plant.
Great. Well, We're gonna be wrapping up the podcast a little bit, so I wanted to know just where you see yourself headed with your business, and what kinds of experiences you're looking for in your business, and clients as well. Like, what's your direction?
Yeah. It's such a great question because I feel like, again, with the pandemic, it's really shaken the boat a lot with businesses. And I think that businesses used to be able to like have a business plan and sort of then like coast through like a growth scenario. And now there's just so many pivots. And for me, and I don't know if people know this outside of it, but there's been a ball jar shortage. So just like typical canning jars. And it hasn't been completely pandemic related. Part of it is like they got like the little companies got bought up by a bigger company and they had supply chain issues. But we've just faced so many supply chain issues in the past couple of years that has really determined the direction that my business is headed. I am really exhausted from trying to find jars. And if I find the jars, I can't find the lids. If I get the lids, I can't get the right color label paper. It's just been this constant dance. And so I have been dropping products. Like I used to do a whole bunch of brewed iced teas and I just refuse. It's one thing if I can just go to Bi-Mart, buy jars and then do my brewing day. But if I have to go to Bi-Mart and then Walmart and then Winco, like I'm not that girl. I can't handle it. So I just stopped doing iced tea completely. And so like where we're headed in the future, I do feel like I mentioned the conflict between tea season and marigold season and Day of the Dead. I do feel like that is kind of coming to a head a little bit, and that where it used to be like the marigolds were a part of everything I do, now the marigolds are sort of the dominant part. And so I'm really in that question, Carla. I don't have an answer, but that's exactly where I'm at right now, is trying to figure out like, we used to have 5-year plans and they were reasonable to make, but now I don't really know. And I thought I would take the winter to figure it out. And now it's mid-March, and I still don't exactly know. So I'm just trying to be really smart about it. And I'm trying to, one of the things that we haven't talked about is that chai is getting harder and harder to make because I'm really attached to organic and fair trade ingredients. And we're running out of forests, to be honest. Like Guatemala's been hit really hard with a lot of environmental, big events in the past 5 years. And so those forests are getting wiped out and not growing back. And so, there are warnings. Okay, one, every time I buy cardamom, the price goes up. It used to be like once a year or once every 2 years, but now it's literally every time I purchase. And so I finally just said to my spice people, like, can I get a year's worth? What would that look like? And, will you tell me when it's time to stop? Because at some point it's not going to be a sustainable product to offer.
And so are you mainly sourcing your cardamom from Guatemala then?
That is, when I first got into this, it was all coming from Sri Lanka. But in the past couple of years, the organic forests have been in Guatemala. And they're coming with little notes saying, like we're running out of forest. Like due to global warming is what the sign says. Due to global warming, we have less cardamom than ever and more people that want it. And so just last week I secured this year's worth. And so I'm like, okay, I've got another year of the chai. And it's so good to know, because I've been like, do I do it? Do I not do it? Like, when do we stop? And, anyway.
Tell me, you just made me a little bit more curious about the plant then, cardamom. What is the plant? And
it's a tree.
Okay, it's a tree. Okay,
yeah.
Cardamom is a tree.
The pods are the fruit. Yeah.
The pod and is I'm just thinking, I don't even know if I know what cardamom looks like, which is surprising because I consider myself pretty well known.
Yeah, you do. It's like a little green pod. And
Okay. Okay.
you crush it and it has black seeds inside. And a lot of
Okay.
times with chai, people just use the seed, so you would never see the pod, but the pod is a big part of what we do. It brings a lot more oil and kind of a strange flavor that I don't know. Uh, Probably folks in India might be like, "What are you doing, girl?" But we love it. We love it.
Okay. And so that tree, though, is that tree native to Guatemala, or has that been imported? Or
I'm I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure that it's from like Sri Lanka and more like in that area. And then
okay.
I mean, the spice trade is, the very origins of colonialism. And I mean, wars used to be fought over black pepper and cardamom. And, especially the Dutch East Bay Trading Company, they would go and like burn entire swaths of forest to like, smite their enemies. So it has a very long and bloody past, actually.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, we could have probably a whole podcast just on the history
Yes.
of
Yeah.
chai.
Yes. And the spice trade in general, it's pretty wild. And, we just take them for granted, like black pepper. People don't even think about where it comes from or what. And, to say like, oh, yeah, like slaves were traded for that and people suffered. And, it's just a really wild thing to learn about, like genocides
Oh,
based on the spice trade.
um, so with this disruption of supply chains and, you're taking it as you go year by year, is there any part of you that thinks, okay, what would be something that like I don't have to have like a supply chain that's more global, or
It's
are you
gonna
contemplating that?
it's gonna sound so funny, but I've been self-employed for 23 years, which I think is like amazing, but also like um sometimes I just fantasize about getting a job, to be honest. Like,
Uh-huh.
what would it be like if I knew what kind of money I had to work with every month? And what would it be like to just get a paycheck and then just like go home, because I work all the time. Like I'm
Mhm.
always answering a phone call or getting an email or planning my schedule. And it's just a lot. It's a big dance. I feel like somebody told me once, being self-employed is like it's like a dance marathon, but you don't get to pick the music. And that is like every morning you wake up and you're like, is it a disco day? Is it a slow dance day? Like what is going to happen? So
Uh-huh.
sometimes I fantasize and I get so far, because I'm 51 now. So I have a lot of friends who are retiring.
Uh-huh.
And, they worked the job, and so I'll spend a week being like, "Oh my gosh, maybe like that could have been me." And then like finally like reality hits. You're like, you never could have done it. Like that is just not your personality. It's not what you're here for in the world. Like it never would have worked out. But it's so funny to have those days where I'm like, what if I had just I don't even know what I would have done, right?
I know those days.
Yeah.
It's been in the same context.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for your time telling us about Uber Herbal. I'm gonna just put up here as a little ticker. Let's see. It's uberherbaloregon.com,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Okay, so that in case anybody who's listening is interested in ordering marigold garlands or instant herbal mixes and fire ciders, that's how they can reach you. And also, you do have a physical presence then at the farmers market still, or not?
Yes, I'm always at the Saturday Grants Pass Farmers Market, and then we're at the Thursday Medford Market, the first Thursday of every month, and then we're at
Okay.
the Saturday Ashland Market from May through November. Yeah, and then I do all sorts of events, and I used to have like my little shop in Grants Pass. I had a little tea and toast shop for years, and I closed it when the pandemic hit. And so now it's our commercial kitchen. So I just tell people if the lights are on, come on in. It's still you're welcome in there, but we don't keep like specific hours.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Carla. It's been nice. You have great questions.